Hello, and good day to everyone. So we're just I'm going to jump right in as everyone is getting themselves settled for today's session. I see some cameras turning on. For I see some folks getting ready. I'm so excited to introduce our explorer for today's video call. But before we introduce Colin, I want to introduce myself. My name is Chris Ahern. I am Director of Partnerships for Reach the World, and I am responsible for working with all of our educators and classrooms throughout the United States. And with me today, also from Reach the World, is Timothy Jacob, who is the director of our Traveler program. So he works with our Traveler cohort and explorers from all over the world. And he will be manning the chat. So if anyone has any questions or anything like that, we will give you the opportunity. We will unmute mics and let you talk about different things. But you can always use the chat function to post in some additional questions, and we'll keep an eye on that. Tim will also be posting some additional information that will be relevant to what we're talking about, maybe some additional explainers or links and so on. But before we allow Colin to jump right in, we always like to open these video calls with the chance for you all to say hi to him. So I'm going to unmute you and then count to 3, and I'd like everyone to kind of give Colin a nice big warm hello. So 1, 2, 3.
Hello.
Awesome, wonderful. That is great. I love the enthusiasm from everyone. You are all now muted. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our explorer, Colin, who is speaking to us live from Buenos Aires, Argentina, having just gotten off a long flight, which he will tell you all about now.
Hey everybody, my name is Colin Heinrich, and I work for a company called Indigare Travel. So I am currently on my way down to Antarctica to go sailing around in the peninsula area down there. I have a 3-day layover here in Buenos Aires, so I am spending a little bit of time exploring the city. There's a lot of really good food. There's soccer here, so pretty much as soon as we get off this, I'm gonna head off. I actually just walked in the door, pretty much. It's been about a 30-hour ordeal to get here. I got up at 4 a.m. Yesterday to head to the airport. And then I had a flight to Houston, and then I had a 10-hour layover in Houston before I got on this flight to Buenos Aires, which was a 10-hour flight. And I landed, and then I waited in line for 2.5 hours in customs and walked in the door and started talking to you guys. So good to be here.
That's awesome. And just so everyone knows, where did you begin your journey?
New York. I'm from New York. Yeah.
Awesome. And so you have a few days in Buenos Aires. What will you be doing in Buenos Aires, and then how will you go from Buenos Aires to that exploration of the Antarctic Peninsula?
Yeah, so just to tell you a little bit about what I do for work, I am a trip designer, and I also head up a conservation and environmentalism initiative at a company called Indigare Travel in New York. So basically, when people want to go travel, they'll reach out to us, and we act as travel agents, advising them on where to go, matching them with the right hotels, setting them up with tours, making restaurant reservations, basically handling the trip from start to finish. And part of that job is knowing the facts about the place. So what I'm doing right now is called a scouting trip. I am coming down here to meet with various hotels, try a bunch of different restaurants, meet a bunch of different guides that we work with, and get that firsthand knowledge so that when people come to me and say, hey, what's the right place for me and my family to go to? I can tell them, Buenos Aires is perfect for this kind of person. These sorts of hotels are perfect for you. I know a guide that I think would get along well with your family, that sort of thing. So I'm here for 3 days doing meetings and trying. It's not. I make it sound like work. I'm pretty much exploring and eating at some really nice restaurants and meeting a lot of really cool people, and then just taking that information home with me. The Antarctic portion is going to be more limited just because I'm going to be on a boat the whole time. So whereas here I am kind of keeping my own schedule, running around, meeting with different hotels, trying restaurants, walking around, seeing what I want to see. When I'm on the boat, it's going to be more entirely based on what the expedition leaders are allowing and what the schedule is there. So we're going to be waking up early in the morning, probably going on some excursions to the shore, going whale watching, seeing penguins. We're going to be doing a polar plunge where we just jump into the water. We're going to have a harness wrapped around us for that because the water is so cold that a lot of people pass out and you need to be able to be reeled back in like a fish. So yeah, that's kind of what's in store.
And what if you can choose one thing? And I know this is always difficult. What is the one thing that you're most excited about doing? I would say one for Buenos Aires and one for Antarctica.
So for Buenos Aires, I don't know if you guys have ever heard this about Argentina, but it's a huge steak area. It has a lot of really high quality beef, a lot of cows, and so steakhouses are a really big thing here. And so part of this scouting trip is I'm going to a place called Don Julio, which is the best steakhouse in Argentina. I think it was like number 14 or something like that on the best restaurants in the world list this year. So I'm really looking forward to getting to try that. In Antarctica, the thing I'm most looking forward to is there's one night so most of the nights I'm staying on the boat in a cabin, but there's one night where we're actually going to take some really thick sleeping bags and then just go and sleep in the snow on the continent itself. And that'll be really cool because this is my 7th of 7 continents. So this will kind of complete the set for me.
That's amazing. That's really exciting. I mean, I know Miss Latore is one of the teachers taking part in today's video call, and her students last year were able to explore Antarctica in a slightly different way. So to hear how your expedition is happening, but in a very unique way, and that the fact that you are able to actually be able to spend even just one night on the continent itself, and especially since you've been able to visit all the other 6, that is really cool and really exciting. So I see in the chat that that Tim is letting everyone know to be thinking of questions that you'd like to ask Colin. So this is me repeating that opportunity. In about 2 minutes, we are going to start asking you all for those questions. But before we do that, I did have one additional question based on what you were talking about within the work that you do around. You mentioned the environment aspect, and obviously the travel piece, going to one of the best restaurants in the country and in the world, that makes sense. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that element of your work involves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so travel is inherently a very taxing activity on the environment. Private jets and airplanes and all of that are some of the biggest sources of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so part of what I'm doing is leading up an initiative where our company is still doing all this travel planning, but trying to do it in a more responsible way with more regard to the environment and with regard to cultural and community development aspects. So really trying to do a social responsibility, I would say, initiative to try to make sure that we're able to preserve the places that we send people for the next generation, like you guys. Antarctica in particular is one that I would say is probably the last destination that's really pristine. It's really, really heavily regulated. Trips there are bound by what's called the Antarctic Treaty, and so they're really strict about what you're allowed to do there. For the camping on the continent itself day, just for an example, you're not allowed to leave any waste whatsoever. So going to the bathroom means going in a bottle and bringing it back to the ship. But I'm basically taking the lessons that I learned here and learning how to apply them to all of the other trips that we do. We plan trips all over the world to, Africa and Australia and Asia. So these sorts of lessons can apply to a lot of different places.
Awesome, and I think that's awesome. That's so great, and I would imagine that some of the students might have some questions asking you a little bit more information. But we did have a question from a teacher who was unable to make it today. That Tim is bringing into the chat that I wanted to add in. So Miss Davison's class wanted to know: do people live in Antarctica? And then the secondary question is that are there schools there?
Mm-hmm. So people do live in Antarctica, and actually it's a very small community spread around a couple of different science stations. So the largest is called McMurdo Station, and that's the one that's jointly run by America and New Zealand. There are not any permanent civilizations in the area that I'm going to be going to. It's pretty much just all penguins and ice. But in the areas like McMurdo, there are around up to 1,000 people that live there over the summer. In winter, it becomes a much smaller group. Most people leave once the sun sets in around April, and then it doesn't rise again until around November. So the people who are there at that time of year are a special breed of people who can take that. But there's only around 300 of them at that time. But they're all adults. There's no schools. They're all scientists. If anybody's familiar with Anthony Bourdain, he actually did a really interesting documentary about Antarctica where he meets a lot of these people. So everybody there is there with an exact purpose. There's nobody who's just hanging out that live there. It's all scientists.
And we actually have these. So quick plug for our YouTube channel. We recorded all of our video calls with the SA Agalas 2 last year as they explored Antarctica, and they talked a lot about that aspect, especially that a lot of the scientists flew from Cape Town, South Africa, to Antarctica, and when they landed, they actually landed on an ice runway. Not too far off from one of those research stations, which is really fascinating to think that it's actually a little sometimes easier to fly there by private jet in a place.
A lot of those planes will have a lot of those planes will actually have skis on the bottom of them to help them make sure their wheels don't collapse under the ice.
That's incredible. So one last question from the chat, and then we're going to open it up to Ms. Latour and Ms. Shearer's students. So the water that you'll be swimming in, when you'll be dangled out like a fish, how cold is it in terms of?
So the water is actually 29 to 30 degrees in temperature, and that's below freezing, but it doesn't freeze because it has so much salt in it and the water's moving around too much to freeze. But you go into shock after something like 30 seconds, and people die after like 2 minutes. So definitely don't want to spend too much time in there. Although there is actually, and my dad is on this trip with me. I brought him along, and one of his good friends is an endurance swimmer.
Mm.
And so she's swum across the English Channel, she swum across the Bering Strait, and one of the things she did was actually swim, I think, um, swim a kilometer or so in Antarctica.
Wow.
And so she wrote a book about it that was really interesting, but she talks about how it took her about 3 hours to get her body temperature back up to normal. Um, and when you're in that water, you can't just dump hot water on you to heat yourself back up because your skin will just burst. You have to have cold water and then cooler water and then lukewarm water. So
Wow. Well, I would imagine that many let's just plan to make sure that you take some lots of photos and possibly video as you do that, because
oh yeah, no,
I know I'm very interested in seeing what that looks like. So I want to be able to now turn it over to some of our students who are following along this really great opportunity. Miss Latore, if you can select one of your you can select one of your students to go first. Ms. Shear, I see that there is a little bit of a lunch change. If you can select one of your students who is sticking around to ask a question, please let us know. Or if you want, we can also start with that first question you put in the chat. So just let us know either way. But Ms. Latore, I'm going to unmute you now, and we can.
Yeah. What was the favorite place you went to?
my favorite place I've been is the Galapagos Islands off the coast of Ecuador. They are incredibly remote, and people never even got there until around the 1800s. So none of the animals there ever learned to fear humans. And so you can be swimming around with sea lions and penguins. There are penguins there too, actually, and manta rays, and it's wildlife there is just insane, and the landscape is beautiful. So
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. And so Ms. Shearer did ask. I'm gonna let her students, one of her students, ask a question in a second. But I think this is actually a really good question that she had asked. What types of jobs are most seen in Antarctica? Since you mentioned that it's really scientists are on research stations. What are those jobs look like, as far as you know?
yeah, so Antarctica is really interesting work-wise because everybody, it's so remote and it's such a closed system that everybody supports each other. So there's no one job that's more important than the other. The purpose of the research stations are research. So you get biologists who are studying things like anything from penguins to marine life to microbes in the soil. You get glaciologists who are studying the ice and taking ice cores out to study, what the temperature of the world was like millions of years ago. But those jobs are then supported by, let's say, the pilots who have to fly them to these areas to do the research. And those pilots need to be supported by what's called the fuelies. And they're the ones who are handling, the gasoline and all of that. You have the janitors who are cleaning everything up. You have the cooks that are cooking for everybody. You have the uh, the maintenance people who are operating heavy machinery. Um, it's such a tight knit community because every single job is completely crucial to the success of every single other job.
It's so funny to hear you say that, because in Holly, in doing video calls with Holly from Antarctica last year, she kept saying that the entire crew and researchers, everyone on the ship, always said they had the same saying over and over again: one team, one dream. That everyone was working together and everyone really believed in that, and how important it was that even though there are people who had specialties, everyone was always working together within that.
Mhm.
So, Ms. Shearer, I want to unmute you and just see if any of your students do have any questions before you have to jump off. Are there any students who might have a question? I've unmuted you.
Here. We'll turn it around this way. So they all
Perfect.
jump skip and went to lunch on us. So I offered them the opportunity to stay, but today is Friday, so everybody has to go see their friends.
Fair.
So I don't really have a question. I actually have two people here observing the classroom who are going to be future teachers. So
Cool.
we are just excited. We've never done this program before. Really nice to meet you, Colin. So we're excited to follow your journey and see what it's like. Of course, we've never been to Antarctica, so anything you can teach us will be great. And
I haven't either, but I'll be sure.
they're all business students, so we love the travel and tourism part of that, and especially, conservation, nonprofit, that's us too. So I'm going to jump off and go to lunch as well, but we will be following and we'll watch the rest of this recording. So
Okay, great. To talk to you when I'm back.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome. So that means Miss Latore, if you can ask them one of your students to ask you a question.
Okay. We should tell you these students all left their patrol. They got permission to leave their patrol to come here because it's their lunch too. So they're back.
All right, I wanted to mute you for a second because it does get a little loud, but it's so exciting to see so many students that are skipping lunch. I mean, I'm hungry because I'm a little late for lunch to see so many students. So if we can get one student who's ready to answer the question, I can unmute you.
Hi, I would like to know what's the time length that scientists stay in Antarctica?
So most people go for the summer, which would be in the southern hemisphere. The summer is from around December through March, and that's when the sun never sets for the entirety of those 3 months, and then they go home for the winter just because it's so cold and difficult to maintain a lot of people there. But some people are there year round. And usually what happens is it's a thing called a contract, where you're there for that certain amount of time. And there's a lot of people who do what's called re-upping their contract, where they go back to Antarctica for the summer every single year. And there's people that have been going back to Antarctica for 40 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, I love going to special places on summer vacation, but to go to Antarctica every summer or in our case the winter just seems extra special. Miss Latore, another question, please.
Yes, Nick right here. Nick, can you come up in the camera?
What is your favorite food so far in South America?
My favorite food? Food,
yeah.
Okay. So actually, there is a fruit in South America called the granadilla. And there's a lot of fruit all over the place that you just cannot find anywhere else. But the granadilla is, it's just the best tasting thing I've ever had. And I've tried desperately to find anywhere in New York that sells it, and I just cannot find it. So I'm just looking forward to having that again. But beyond that, I mean, there's tons of good food here. There's ceviche, which is raw fish with vinegar and veggies. There's steak, like I had mentioned. So I was in Brazil earlier this year, and a big thing over there is açaí. And it's this frozen berry that gets turned into mush, and then you mix it with like granola and coconut flakes and cocoa nibs, and it's so good.
Oh goodness! Now we're all hungry.
Sorry to do this.
Oh no, this is great, and it's such a great question. I mean, I think that's the exciting thing is that if you, in order to get to a place like Antarctica, you have to go through another country, whether it's Argentina or Chile, or if you're coming from South Africa, you have to come through Cape Town, and each way you're able to experience a little bit of that country as you make your way down. So Miss Davison also had another question that she had sent us before the recording, that asked if you knew anything, especially because you talk a lot about the aspect of conservation within your work in travel. As she wanted to know if you know anything about the global goals. So the Sustainable Development Goals and that sort of stuff.
I don't really know the specifics of global goals, but I know that there are definitely some very important things that need to be taken care of. And I'm actually going to be doing, so this is a relatively new initiative for us, really getting into this conscious travel. And so I'm actually going to be doing a workshop next year where I do a certification course learning about what sustainable travel needs and what we can do to help ensure that a lot of these sustainable travel goals are met. So yeah, it's something that we're definitely focusing a lot more on, and I'm specifically going to be learning about in my own studies soon.
That's great, and for that matter, there are a lot of really great resources for classrooms, especially around teaching the Sustainable Development Goals. They were put in place by the United Nations, and it's really centered around what can we do to protect the world and everything in it, and that includes us, plants and animals, and the earth itself, and really everything in between. So Ms. Latore, hopefully you have another person, another volunteer for a question.
How many hours are you away from Antarctica?
How many hours?
Yeah.
How long does it take?
How long does it take to get there?
Yeah, so I'm in Buenos Aires, which is at the north of Argentina, and Argentina is about as tall as America is wide. So I'm gonna have to fly from Buenos Aires to a town called Ushuaia, and that's gonna be probably a 5-hour flight or so. And when I get to Ushuaia, I'm gonna get on a boat, and I'm gonna go through what's called the Drake Passage. And that is a 600-mile stretch of ocean between the tip of South America and the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. So all in all, it's going to take me about 3 days from here to get to Antarctica itself. And then it's going to be another 3-day journey back from there when I finish.
And how long are you going to be in Antarctica?
I'll be in Antarctica for about 6 days.
Okay.
So I'm here until Sunday. I have one overnight in Ushuaia, and then I get on the boat the next morning. I spend 2 days sailing. I'm there for 6 days, 2 days sailing back, and then another overnight in Buenos Aires. And then I'll be back in New York by about 11 a.m. on November 15th.
So just to clarify, that means that it will be about 12 days from when you leave Buenos Aires until you return, with all of the different aspects of travel that you're doing.
Mm-hmm. About that, yeah.
Wow. So almost 2 weeks just from Argentina, and it took you a little while to get there.
Yeah, it took a little while to get here.
Miss Latore, let's get another question.
Tommy, go.
What was your favorite continent you've been to?
My favorite continent I've been to, man, it's got to be. I mean, it's got to be between. If we're taking the Galapagos out, because that was my favorite place overall, and that's off the coast of South America, I would say it's down to Africa and Asia, and that's for two very different reasons. Africa, you get to go on safari and see wild elephants and lions and giraffes and everything. The first time I was there, I saw a pride of lions hunting a giraffe, actually, and they didn't catch it, but they gave it their best. Asia is really great for an entirely different reason. There are a lot of animals there and a lot of nature that's just wonderful to see. And actually, I would say that my second favorite place in the entire world is in Vietnam. It's in a place called Phang Nga Ke Bang National Park, and it's where the largest caves in the world are. So there's a cave there where the opening is about the size of a television. You have to crawl through it. But when you get through that opening, it opens into a cavern that's the size of a New York City block, and a 40-story skyscraper could fit inside of it. So there is a lot of really gorgeous nature there. But more than that, Asia just has so many different cultures and so much cuisine and language, and it's culture shock at its best. You get there and you just don't know which way is up anymore because life is so different. But once you spend a little time there, and I was there for about a year or so, you start to really appreciate the differences and even see that there's a lot of things that they do better.
And I mean, I think one of the best aspects of travel and exploring new places is that each place that you're able to visit is exciting in and of itself. That there will always be places that you'll never forget because of a particular experience, but every time you have a chance to see something new, there's something to learn, and there's something to take away from that. So Miss Latore, let's get another volunteer, please.
I think we have one more question, and then we're gonna have to go. So Hannah, can you see? Are you seeing on the screen?
No, I am.
Okay, good.
Who inspired you to travel the world?
Who inspired me?
Yeah.
That would be my dad, actually, and he's asleep on the bed about 20 feet from me. But my dad was in the Navy, and so when he was young, he was on deployment on a boat to the Philippines. And when I was born, we lived in San Diego, and then we moved to a different place every 2 years of my life. And when I graduated college, I decided to become a travel journalist and a photographer. And I wound up, the first place I moved was to the Philippines, which was where he had lived when he was young. And so, I think I've really followed his example there.
Oh, that's awesome. So I know that Ms. Latore, you have to leave. So we just want to do two things. First of which, as Tim put in the chat, would it be possible for you to angle your camera so we could see what it looks like out that window?
Yeah.
We'd love to see that view to begin with. Apologies in advance for your dad if he's falling asleep. Wow, how cool. So that is Buenos Aires.
Mm-hmm.
That is
I see
amazing.
that the design is very different, but overall it could be a city in America too.
Oh, absolutely. So I do know, and Colin, I'm sure you want to probably take a nap yourself, but I want to give Miss Latore's class a chance to say thank you. So I'm going to unmute you, and then I'll count you down, and we can, and that way everyone can get one more chance. So 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. It's great to talk to all of you, and I'm looking forward to doing this again when I can tell you about my experiences once I've been to Antarctica.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Colin. We'll have this uploaded really soon, but thank you, Miss Latore. Thank you, Miss Shearer, and thank you all to all the other classrooms who will be watching this via our message. Via our platform in the next few days. So thanks so much, Colin. Get some sleep, and we'll be talking soon.
Will do. All right, I'll talk to you guys again soon.